Someone Like You by Sparkypasker, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 29. This chapter includes the Hosu incident, so beware of blood. Izuku hadn't planned on being back in Hosu so soon. In fact, if it was up to him, he wouldn't have come back ever. But alas, that wasn't how life worked. He had been busy fulfilling his promise to Stain. In the last few weeks, he had arrested nearly a dozen heroes. The fact that he could so easily find heroes that had broken the law was a little unnerving. In fact, just last week, he had arrested a small group of 5 heroes that were running an insurance scam. Unfortunately, that was on the milder end of what Izuku had found. That's the entire reason he was in Hosu again. He had come across reports of a hero named Jetstream who had used excessive force against villains and had large amounts of property damage. With his quirk, he could create water and shoot it out of his hands. He could control the velocity, but not the direction. He could make it travel so fast that it could actually cut through a human limb, and he had done so many times. Once it even led to the death of a purse snatcher when Jetstream cut his femoral artery. Most of the time, Izuku could use paper trails and video feeds to prove the existence of a crime. But Jetstream was a little further up in the rankings than Izuku normally targeted, ranked 250 to be exact. When Izuku first started to arrest heroes, he was concerned about how the Hero Public Safety Commission would react. But they didn't seem to be doing anything yet. Whether that was because they didn't care, couldn't actually do anything due to the amount of evidence, or, although unlikely, they agreed with Izuku's actions was unknown. All he knew was no one had come searching for his head yet, so he was just going to keep going. Izuku walked down the main road through Hosu. That was where the agency Jetstream worked for was located. Izuku was hoping to interview a couple of his co-workers. One in particular, Manuel, worked with Jetstream fairly often and would have a better insight as to his personality and morals. It was also said that Manuel was easygoing and pleasant to talk to, so Izuku hoped he wouldn't be insulted or defensive about Izuku going after his co-worker. Izuku's musings were interrupted by a series of explosions. All around him, civilians were screaming and screeching sounded from the sky as monsters with exposed brains descended onto the crowds. Nomu. Izuku had never seen one personally until now, but he had watched the video of the USJ attack that was stored on the police's database. They looked a little different. A couple were thinner and had wings, but there was no doubt as to what they were. Izuku ran towards where parts of a building had collapsed. He used his visor to find there were 2 people trapped underneath. He quickly began to dig out the trapped civilians while watching for further evidence of collapse. Digging them out wouldn't do any good if the debris just caved back in. The emergency services had just arrived when Izuku pulled out the last person. Neither had injuries that were immediately fatal, but one definitely had a concussion and the other had a broken arm and a couple broken ribs. He escorted both of them to waiting paramedics when a hero came down the road shouting, "Tenya! Tenya!" Manuel yelled. Izuku ran up to Manuel. "Are you looking for someone? What do they look like? I can help." "Sorry, kid, I can't push this off onto a vigilante." Izuku pulled out his identification card and handed it to Manuel. "I'm not a vigilante. I'm absent. I was supposed to be the one interviewing you tonight." Manuel's eyes lit up in recognition and he nodded. "I'm looking for my intern. We got separated when the attack started. His temporary hero name is Tenya. He was wearing a full suit of armor and has exhaust pipes coming out of the back of his legs." "I will look for him. You stay here and help put out the fires," Izuku instructed as he started running down the street in the direction Manuel had come from. "Got it!" he heard Manuel shout as he ran in the opposite direction where the explosions had started and the fires were raging. Izuku tried to tune out the sounds of heroes fighting monsters and people screaming. After a few blocks, he was far enough away from the panic that he was able to hear the swing sound of steel clashing against metal. Izuku immediately turned down the alley he heard the sounds coming from. A familiar voice echoed against the stone walls. Being taken in by the hatred before you and trying to fulfill your own desires. This is the furthest from what a hero should be. For that, you will die. Without stopping, Izuku quickly rounded a corner while pushing a button on his visor. The first thing he saw was Stain, with his sword held above his head. At his feet was a teenager clad in a suit of armor. His helmet had been knocked off at some point and was laying at the back of the dead-end alley. Stain swung his sword down. The metal clanged as it was stopped by the new bracer on Izuku's forearm. He had never been more happy for Hatsume's quick work. Stain's eyes widened in recognition. You, he sneered. I thought we had an understanding, Stain, Izuku yelled. Understanding? We both know you're just pussyfooting around. None of the heroes you arrested were high enough to even make it into their local newspapers. You were doing the absolute minimum that was needed. It's not enough. Stain pushed down on the sword harder. Izuku's arm lowered slightly under the pressure. That may be so, but I am still not going to allow you to kill heroes, especially ones that are just doing what they're supposed to be doing by stopping you. Izuku pushed up under the weight of the sword. Stopping me? Stain laughed maniacally. He wasn't trying to stop me. He didn't even know Native was here when he came chasing after me. He's here for revenge. Izuku's attention was brought to the unconscious form of Native slumped against the back wall of the alley. What? Izuku muttered as he glanced down at a very familiar face with a bleeding cut across his cheek. Oh, Tenya. Ida Tenya. Ingenium's brother. Well, you did paralyze his brother. It's natural that he would be angry. Heroes should be above that. They should never allow their emotions to get the better of them. Stain growled angrily. They're human, Izuku yelled back. They're allowed to be angry or upset or sad. The best heroes are the ones that are relatable. I don't know who you are, but just leave. This is my fight, Izuku heard from below him. What did this kid think he was doing, bringing attention to himself? Manuel sent me. You're Tenya, right? I need you to just shut up right now, Izuku pleaded. Stain stared Izuku down. You know, when we first met, I believed you displayed traits of what a true hero should be. So I waited, and I watched, and I saw that you were just as fake as them. You said you would expose the fake heroes, but you didn't. I did, Izuku interrupted. You didn't, Stain snarled. You only arrested some minor heroes that no one cared about. It didn't even cause a ripple in society. Nothing is going to change if we continue to go down your path. It will. It just takes time. We have to start small to make people believe what we say. It's not working fast enough. And even after I realized that, I still tried to follow what you said. When this child interrupted my cleansing, I was going to let him live. Because, as you said, heroes save everyone, villain or not. But Stain took one of his hands off the sword to point at Tenya. He wasn't here to save the villainous hero. He was here only for revenge. It was then that I decided there is only one true hero, and that is All Might. All others must die. Stain, with only one hand on his sword, was slightly off balance. Izuku used this to his advantage. He used his bracer to knock away the sword and run forwards towards Stain in an attempt to surprise him. Stain jumped back further and pulled a small throwing knife out of its sheath. With precise aim, he threw it towards Izuku's visor. Izuku ducked out of the way and distantly heard the knife clatter against the stone behind him. Izuku took a staff out of its holster on his hip and ran at Stain. Stain charged at him, one knife in each hand. Izuku blocked one knife with his staff, the other barreled toward his abdomen. Izuku broke his staff apart, surprising Stain. Izuku could hear Tenya in the background pleading for Izuku to stop, to run away, to leave him and save himself. Izuku was becoming extremely annoyed with him. "If you're so worried about me, then stand up!" Izuku yelled. Izuku and Stain continued to clash. Izuku would dodge, Stain would dodge, Stain would take a hit, Izuku would take a cut. Shit. Izuku got cut. He quickly removed some bandages from a container along his belt and wrapped up the injury. He should have known. He should have been more careful. Stain had paralyzed Ingenium by slipping a knife between the parts of his armor. He had done the same to Izuku, slicing open his skin in the small, nearly imperceivable space between the sleeve of his top and the bracer. With a victorious grin, Stain slowly dragged his tongue along the blade and made a show of collecting Izuku's blood, drawing it into his mouth, swirling it around, and swallowing it. Immediately, Izuku froze up. Stain sauntered over to him. Stain slowly circled Izuku. "Oh, look at that. You shifted your balance right before I froze you and managed to stay standing. I can count the number of times that's happened on one hand. But do you know a secret? That never saved those other heroes, and it won't save you either." Stain raised his katana. "No! Stop!" Izuku heard Tenya cry. Stain slashed across Izuku's body. He fell to the ground with a grunt. Stain smiled in victory. The smile quickly turned into a snarl. "Oh, very clever. Your clothes protect you from blades. If it's any consolation, I didn't order it that way specifically for you." "Well, it doesn't matter. That means I will just have to take it off you." Stain kneeled on the ground and quickly removed Izuku's hood, visor, and mask, exposing his curly green hair and green eyes. Stain then pulled down the collar of his coat to uncover his neck. He removed a smaller knife from a sheath on his arm. Just as the knife touched the skin of his neck, the sound of an engine was heard. Before Stain could do more than draw a little blood, Tenya flew through the air and landed a kick on the back of Stain's head. The force of the kick forced him to fly over Izuku and land near Native. He laid on the ground, unmoving. "I am so sorry I got you into this." Tenya bowed at a 90-degree angle. "You unfroze? Then there is a time limit." "Well, of course there's a time limit. After all, Ingenium can move, but that could have just as easily have been the result of being healed." Izuku shook his head. "No, that's not the point right now. Stop standing around and detain Stain," Izuku commanded. "Oh, yes! Right!" Tenya shouted. But when Tenya turned back around, Stain was gone. "What?" Tenya exclaimed. A laugh resounded from above them. "Well done! Very well done! No one has been released from my quirk while still in my presence before. Now I just have to make sure that doesn't happen again." A crackle was heard when Stain roughly pulled out the blade he had stuck into the mortar between the bricks. His descent was suddenly halted when a wall of ice appeared in the alley. Tenya's head snapped to the source. "Todoroki! You shouldn't be here!" he screamed. A distress signal was sent out from this location. It came over the comm system, so I responded. "What? But how?" Tenya said. I'm not stupid enough to go into a fight with a serial killer without calling backup first, Izuku shouted in frustration. But that doesn't matter right now. Get out of here and go get some heroes. Too late, they heard from atop the ice wall. The three of them looked up to see Stain standing above them. You are clearly not hero material. You cut off your view of the enemy and you come into a fight without backup. I will be happy to kill you if that's what you want so badly. Stain leapt towards Todoroki. Don't let him drink your blood, Izuku yelled. If these kids were going to be so adamant about staying, then Izuku was going to use them to his advantage. Understood. Todoroki stomped his foot on the ground. Pillars of ice shot out, one after another. Stain dodged them again and threw knives in an effort to cut open Todoroki's skin. Tenya, assuming Stain was too busy with Todoroki to notice him, attacked from behind, but Stain would not be so easily fooled a second time. As soon as he heard the roar of Tenya's engines, he jumped up and over Tenya's head, tongue dragging across his cheek to collect some of the semi-dried blood. He swallowed it quickly and froze Tenya as he was flying towards Todoroki's ice. His armor was the only thing saving his limbs from being broken by the impact, and being frozen prevented whiplash. Unfortunately, neither of those stopped him from receiving some minor blunt force trauma as a result of falling to the ground. Tenya! Izuku yelled. Damn it, if only he could move! His finger twitched. Anticipation coursed through his veins. The effect of Stain's quirk must be wearing off. But why was it wearing off so much quicker? What could be different between them? Was it a result of body weight? Or maybe they had different blood types? There was no way to know for sure, and he doubted Stain would tell them. All he could do was keep trying to move. Stain laughed. You know, I haven't actually had this much fun in a while. But unfortunately, that fun has to end. He ran at Tenya. Todoroki acted quickly and covered Tenya in a dome of ice. Stain's blade skimmed across the surface of the ice. I see I will have to get rid of you first. He ran at Todoroki again. Todoroki was caught off guard by the sudden change and was unable to dodge a knife that was thrown. The blade collected a small amount of blood along its edge and was then pulled back, using a nearly invisible string attached to the handle. Stain quickly licked the blade. Todoroki froze off balance and fell to the ground. As Endeavor's kid, you're probably the biggest threat. If I kill you first, I can take my time with the others. Sorry, kid. That's just the way things are. Shit! Izuku clenched his fist. He could move! He quickly jumped to his feet. He used the magnets he had installed onto his bracers to call the pieces of his staff back to him. As Stain was bringing his knife down on the area between Todoroki's shoulder and neck, the pieces of Izuku's staff flew into his hands. With all his might, he brought the two pieces down onto the back of Stain's head and neck. Stain crumpled to the ground. Izuku panted harshly at the realization of what he just did. He always avoided the head and neck during takedowns. Someone could get killed if he hit them wrong even once, not to mention the fact that Stain had already been hit there once already. A sound drew Izuku's attention away from the possibly dead body of Stain to Todoroki. Blood poured from a puncture on his neck. Izuku abandoned Stain to run to Todoroki's side. He quickly took some bandages out of his belt and applied pressure to the wound. It was too deep. Izuku wouldn't be surprised if the jugular had been grazed. If that was the case, pressure wasn't going to do anything. You need to use your fire to cauterize this wound, Izuku instructed. No, Todoroki spat vehemently. What? Izuku asked in surprise. I'm not going to use his fire, Todoroki yelled. I'm not even going to attempt to get through your thick skull about how stupid that is right now. But if you don't use your fire, you're going to die. Just put pressure on it. I am putting pressure on it, and it's still pouring out blood. If you don't use your fire to seal the wound, you're going to bleed out before the heroes arrive. Using your fire is the only way you're going to survive, so use your damn fire. Todoroki looked at Izuku with anger and defeat. After another moment, his left side alit with flames. Izuku took the hand covered in fire and placed it against the wound. Todoroki clenched his teeth in pain as the fire sealed the wound. Once Todoroki was no longer in danger of bleeding out, he extinguished his flames, and Izuku gently returned his bloodied hand to the ground. Izuku returned his attention to Stain. He took each arm and pulled it behind the back, and shakily bound them together with a zip tie. Between possibly killing Stain and stopping Todoroki from bleeding to death, his body was trembling with the remnants of adrenaline. He doubted he would be able to accurately find Stain's pulse in that condition, so he played it safe and assumed he was still alive. That also helped out his mental health quite a bit as well. He systematically performed a search of Stain's body, trying to remove any and all blades he found. After he removed all he could find, he remembered he still had Native at the back of the alley and hadn't checked on him yet. Native was still unconscious. Izuku saw he had a deep laceration on his leg, sluggishly pumping out blood. Izuku took the remaining bandages out of his pack and packed and wrapped the wound. He also tore off a piece of Native's own costume and used the strip along with half of his staff to create a makeshift tourniquet. He had done before and knew that stopping blood flow for a short amount of time was generally safe, especially when someone's life was in danger. He would prefer if he could get Todoroki to use his fire again, but he didn't think that was going to happen. Izuku pulled up his hood, found his visor and mask, and put them back on, then dragged Native and the still delirious Tenya back out to the main road. By the time he came back for Stain, Todoroki was standing again and able to assist him. Shortly after they were all back on the road, Izuku noticed Manuel followed by a gaggle of heroes running down the road towards them. "Tenya!" he yelled. He fell at Tenya's side and checked him over. "Other than a concussion, he's probably okay," Izuku said to ease his worry. "Absent! I don't think I can thank you enough for saving Tenya." "Hey! Is that Stain?" one of the heroes exclaimed. Endeavor, who had broken through the crowd, scowled at Izuku. "You beat Stain?" he asked. Izuku saw Todoroki tense out of the corner of his eye. "Technically, I guess," Izuku answered slowly. "I don't recognize you. What's your name?" he said with suspicion. His flames danced along his arms, as if anticipating burning Izuku to a crisp. "I'm Absent." A screech pierced the air, interrupting whatever Endeavor was planning to say in response. Everyone turned and caught sight of a Nomu flying towards them. The heroes parted ways as the monster flew through them, claws poised to grab whatever or whoever was in its path. Izuku, surrounded on all sides, was unable to move out of the way fast enough. Before anyone could think, Izuku was grabbed around one arm and by his shoulder. If it wasn't for his Kevlar, he was sure he would have giant puncture holes. As it was, he was definitely going to be bruised. The Nomu flew him higher and higher. He could hear the hero's screams begin to fade as they flew further away. Izuku took his staff and pushed a switch found on the shaft. The tip began to sizzle with arcs of electricity. He pushed the tip against the leg of the Nomu. The monster's body froze mid-air and they began to plummet. The heroes below watched in horror as they fell. A snap coming from their feet was ignored. They flinched when a form suddenly flew past them and into the air towards the falling Nomu and Absent. Izuku watched a Stain jumped up the window ledges of the building, then finally out into the air to meet him. Izuku watched as he withdrew a small penknife from beneath his mask. "You were too reckless, absent!" Stain yelled as he aimed his knife at the expanse of skin that was revealed by the Nomu pulling up his sleeve with its claws. "Stop, villain!" Izuku heard a bellow from the ground. Fire raced towards them. With no way to dodge and getting distracted by the fire, the knife embedded itself into Izuku's arm. He cried out in pain. He wanted to remove it so much. But there was a good chance that if he tried to do that, he would bleed out. Stain has impeccable aim, and if he wanted to cut open an artery, that was what he was going to do. Endeavor shot off another round of flames. Stain contorted his body to fall beneath the flame. Izuku wasn't as lucky. The Nomu's screech and Izuku's scream echoed through the street as they were burned. Izuku's coat and pants protected most of his body from the heat of the fire, but the blade from Stain and Izuku's own skin began to melt. The heat immediately cauterized the wound with the blade still inside. Izuku saw the ground coming closer and closer. After being burned, the Nomu had relaxed its grip on Izuku. He was able to loosen the claws and push himself away, but it wasn't soon enough for him to be able to land on the ground correctly. The side of his foot hit the ground. He felt a crack in his leg. He tried to roll to disperse the force. A pop resounded from his shoulder. Izuku bit his lip to keep from screaming. Once he came to a stop, he took a moment to breathe deeply and looked at the heroes standing in a circle surrounding Stain. "Fakes! All of you are fakes! None of you will take me alive. The only hero I will allow to capture me is All Might. The rest of you can burn in hell!" Stain yelled, radiating bloodlust. No one could move. Izuku's heart began to beat faster and faster. He stopped breathing. Then, as if a switch was flipped, Stain collapsed unconscious. No one dared to move for nearly a full minute afterwards, as if afraid this was a trap to lure one of them in to get killed. The silence was broken by the sound of sirens coming down the street. Once the ambulances arrived, they began to triage and transport. Izuku had tried to deny treatment, but the paramedics stood firmly. If the villain doesn't want to be treated, then just let the police take him to jail. Endeavor instructed the paramedics. "You may be the number 2 hero, but we do not report to you. We treat everyone, regardless of status," one told him. Endeavor scoffed and walked away. What a waste of resources. "I'm a crime fighter," Izuku told the paramedics, hoping that revealing his quirkless status would allow him to leave on his own. "All the more reason, then," they responded. "What?" Izuku asked incredulously. "Crime fighters are considered first responders and are to receive the same treatment as police, firefighters, and heroes." "But I'm quirkless," Izuku felt he had to reiterate. "Yes, I'm aware of what being a crime fighter means. I'm assuming you don't have much experience with medicine." "Well, yeah." "And was it a doctor who denied you treatment? If it was, then they could lose their license." "Well, no. His mother just never allowed him to go to the doctor." "Okay, that's good. It saves me from having to fill out paperwork." The paramedic giggled. "Well, let's get you to the hospital." They helped Izuku get onto the gurney and loaded him into the ambulance. Now that the adrenaline had started to fade, the pain from Izuku's injuries had barreled its way into the front of his mind. "We are going to have to remove your top," they told him as they drove to the hospital. "It's specially made," Izuku panted, trying not to scream. "You won't be able to cut it." "Then just remove your uninjured arm. We need to get an IV started." "I will need some help. I'm pretty sure that shoulder is dislocated at the very least." The paramedic nodded and carefully removed the coat from the one arm. After a quick inspection, they determined it was dislocated, but they couldn't determine if there were any other issues until they got to the hospital to run additional tests. They expertly inserted the IV. "We're going to give you some pain medication," they said as they injected a small amount of liquid into the line using a syringe. Izuku nodded and the pain began to recede. Drowsiness followed soon after, and before he knew it, Izuku was asleep. He woke up later in the hospital. He was lying in an uncomfortable bed with a curtain separating him from the rest of the room. He was wearing a hospital shirt and pants and could feel he had bandages wrapped tightly around his leg, shoulder, and arm. The pieces of his uniform were folded neatly on a chair next to his bed. The coat was splattered with blood, but there didn't seem to be any cuts in it. Izuku was relieved. He wouldn't have to have it fixed. He would be able to continue to patrol. Izuku heard some shuffling from behind the curtain. He carefully stood from the bed and pulled the sheet to the side. His eyes widened when he saw Todoroki and Ida. The sound of the fabric being pulled back brought their attention to him. Todoroki's eyes scanned Izuku's form, noticing the bandages. "You said your name was Absent, right?" he asked. "That's right," Izuku responded. "I have to apologize for my father. He's not well." "You don't have to sugarcoat it. I know that he doesn't care what happens to those who are in his way." "That doesn't mean what he did was right." "You're right, it doesn't, but it's not your fault, so there's no reason for you to apologize." "I suppose." "Yes, although the harm that befell you was unacceptable, what you did was extremely reckless," Ida interrupted, chopping his arm. "What?" Izuku asked. "It's illegal to fight villains with your quirk. That's vigilantism, and it is also extremely dangerous for someone our age to engage villains without training." Izuku looked at Ida incredulously. That was literally what he just did, and he was trying to lecture Izuku about doing what was literally his job? Of course he had no way of knowing that, but still. "That is correct," they heard from the room's door. Standing in the open doorway was Manuel and someone with the head of a dog. "You're Police Chief Surigami Kenji," Izuku said in surprise. He wouldn't have thought this was important enough to warrant more than a detective, but he guessed he was wrong. "That's right," he verified, "and vigilantism is what I should be charging you with," the police chief said, looking at Todoroki and Ida. Ida looked down at his hands in shame, while Todoroki looked at him with indifference. "Then are you telling me we should have just allowed Native to die?" Todoroki asked in a clipped tone. "Does that mean it's okay to break the law as long as everything turns out fine?" the chief asked in response. Todoroki and the police chief stared at each other before Todoroki looked away in defeat. "But that is not going to be what happens." The students looked at Surigami in surprise. "What?" Ida muttered. Surigami nodded. "That's right. Stain suffered from multiple blunt force trauma injuries. It was determined that, of those in attendance, Absent would take the credit for detaining Stain. As long as you agree, then no further charges will need to be taken. If you disagree, I will put a vigilantism charge on your record." They looked at Izuku in surprise. "What? Why? He committed vigilantism too. How does that make sense? He's our age," Ida questioned. "He's a crime fighter. He's legally allowed to take down villains," Surigami explained. "Crime fighter? But he's not a hero. If he uses a quirk without a hero license, he's committing vigilantism," Ida insisted. "Being a crime fighter means he's quirkless, Ida. He has a special license that allows him to act as a hero without having to attend a hero school," Todoroki explained. Ida made a face as if being put out. "Okay, well, I guess I understand." His face smoothed out and he bowed lowly at the waist in Izuku's direction. "I apologize for misunderstanding the situation, and I gladly accept the terms." Todoroki looked at Izuku with something akin to surprise. "I agree as well." Surigami nodded. "Good. Then I will write the report saying just that." He went to leave but thought better of it. "The world's an unfair place. You'll receive none of the commendations that you might have otherwise, but at least as someone invested in protecting the peace, I thank you." He bowed to them before finally leaving. Manuel stayed behind after Surigami left. He faced himself towards Izuku and bowed. I don't think I can thank you enough for saving my intern. I know this is probably not the time or the place, but I hope you will be all right with rescheduling our interview. As punishment for allowing my intern to run wild, my license has been suspended, so I won't be in the office for a while. Ida's face scrunched up. Yeah, that's fine. I will contact your office at a later date to reschedule. With a nod of his head and an apology to Ida, Manuel left the three of them alone. Izuku closed his curtain and began to undress. He moved his limbs around slowly and found only some mild residual pain. He put on his uniform and opened his curtain again. What are you doing? Ida lectured. I'm checking myself out, he said. But you are still injured. Ida insisted. I'm fine. Nothing a little acetaminophen and ice can't fix. He walked out of the room into the nurse's station without looking back. After filling out the paperwork releasing himself from the hospital's custody against medical advice, he walked to the train station, boarded a train, and, finally, was on his way home. A blonde woman in a dark blue skirt and suit top stood in front of a door with two well-dressed men behind her. She rapped her fist against the door. After only a moment, a green-haired woman with her hair pulled up into a low bun opened the door. Midoriya Inko? She asked. Yes. Hello. I am the director of the Hero Public Safety Commission. Would your son be home? Oh, no. Izuku isn't home right now, Inko said sweetly. He's probably out with his friends. I hear they enjoy going to the arcade together. But there are so many nowadays, I couldn't tell you which one, she said with a giggle. Is that so? Madam Director responded. Well then, I'm sorry to bother you. I will try another time. The director and her two subordinates walked back to their car. One held the door of the back seat open, allowing the director to sit, then shut it. Do you think she is aware of her son's activities? One of them asked. I doubt it. She seems more like the kind of mother that happily believes anything her child tells her. She doesn't know anything. Tell our mole in the police department to keep an eye out for any information about Absinthe's location. Understood, Madam Director, they answered. Inko shut the door behind her as the HPSC left. This wasn't good. If they were looking for Izuku, then there was no way that he was going to come back. They were probably going to kill him for daring to play hero, or worse, they could make him into a hero. If that happened, then Inko would never be able to live a carefree life. She would never be able to do whatever she wanted while her cash cow made all her money for her. She bit the tip of her finger in frustration. No one seemed to know where the brat was. Even Hisashi's associates weren't having any luck. Damn it! She was going to have to take more drastic measures. Chapter 30. Katsuki stood in front of the office building feeling underwhelmed. Like, seriously, All Might was all about bright colors and a very in-your-face presence. You would think his sidekick would have been similar. Of course, when they were together, Sir Night-Eye wasn't very noticeable, but Katsuki had always thought that was because of how much more noticeable All Might was. Someone more noticeable will always overshadow those less so. He took a deep breath and walked into the building, praying that he was actually in the right place. No one would let him live it down if he, in fact, had the wrong building. He saw a desk with an unassuming woman manning it. The woman lifted her head upon his entry. Hello, she said in a pleasant monotone voice. No reason to use her customer service voice on someone she deemed unimportant. That ground at Katsuki's nerves. How dare she think she was better than him? He swallowed hard to keep his anger contained. If he made too much of a mess of the situation, he would just be sent back to school and he wouldn't get his answers. I'm here to see Sir Night-Eye, Katsuki growled. She looked at him, unamused. Identification? Katsuki handed over his school ID. She looked at it, then looked at him. Head to the 3rd floor. Turn left as you exit the elevator. Sir Night-Eye's office is the 2nd door on the right. Katsuki grunted at her, took his ID back, and trudged over to the elevator. It opened immediately upon pushing the up arrow. He walked in and pushed the button for the 3rd floor. Within seconds, he was on his floor. He turned left and stood in front of the 2nd door. Although the hallway was silent, Katsuki could hear some faint laughter coming from inside the room. Katsuki lifted his hand to knock, but before it could make contact, a face popped out from the surface. Katsuki had long since silenced his body's automatic response to jump at surprises. Now he simply froze for a quarter of a second before lowering his hand, putting it in his pocket, then staring at the face. "So, are you going to let me in or not?" he grumbled. The face's beady eyes stared at him for another moment. "Of course!" it exclaimed while smiling widely. "Sir, the intern is here!" Katsuki heard the owner of the face yell from the other side of the door. He heard a mumbled reply moments before the door opened. He walked through the open door. "Bakugo Katsuki," said the man sitting at the desk in the middle of the room. "I've been waiting for you." Sir Night-Eye sat with his chin resting against his hands, staring into Katsuki's eyes. Katsuki stared back, barely noticing the 3 people. The face extra, some blue woman, and a centipede-looking freak walked by while saying something about going on patrol or paperwork or something. Katsuki didn't really care one way or the other. The staring contest continued for a few minutes. Katsuki sure wasn't going to be the one to break it. He would rather die than lose. "So, Eraserhead wasn't exaggerating when he informed me about your personality." Katsuki growled. He didn't need some teacher warning people about his attitude. If they can't deal with him, then they don't deserve to be anything more than a pebble in his path to glory. "I appreciate the opportunity to learn under you," Katsuki forced himself to say and barely bowed. If Eraserhead really did send Sir Night-Eye a warning, there was no reason for Katsuki to try to tame himself. "Do you know why I accepted your request?" Sir Night-Eye asked. Katsuki stayed silent. He would rather not say anything than admit he didn't know something. "I accepted it because I like to laugh. I like jokes. And this was the biggest joke I had ever heard." Katsuki bristled. He clenched his fists at his side. Who ever heard of a first-year student damn near demanding to have an internship with a hero who wasn't interested in them to begin with? What could you possibly learn with me that you couldn't learn with another hero? One who actually wanted you there. Katsuki bit his lip. He nearly died when he spilled his guts to Aizawa. Would he be able to do it a second time? There was no way he was going to lose to some stupid emotions. "When do you know you've become a villain?" Katsuki blurted out. Sir Night-Eye blinked in surprise. Of all the questions Bakugo could have asked, that was not one he had ever considered. Bakugo seemed to be the type of person who knew exactly what kind of person, what kind of hero he wanted to be. Night-Eye had performed a background check before accepting the internship request and found exactly what he thought he would. A young man from a fairly well-off family, top of his class, powerful offensive quirk, everything that was to be expected from someone aiming to be a hero. He narrowed his eyes, but evidently that was not all of it. He knew better than most that background checks almost never showed the full story. A young man destined to be a hero. It's not impossible to imagine a lot of things never got reported in order to make sure he reached his goal. "So what did you do that has you questioning your status?" he asked. "I bullied someone for 10 years, then told them to kill themselves." Night-Eye actually did flinch in shock at the blunt delivery. "Why did you bully them?" He didn't really need to know. Bullying someone for any reason was unacceptable, but he wanted to know, what reason could someone have to wish death on another? They were quirkless, and they wanted to be a hero. He was a villain. This young man in front of him was definitely a villain. There was no qualms about that. But Night Eye was a believer in redemption. He believed villains could be rehabilitated if they weren't too far gone. The question was Bakugo Katsuki too far gone? Yes, Night Eye said. Yes? Katsuki asked. You are a villain. Katsuki felt his stomach drop to the floor and his knees threatened to give out from under him. Are they dead? Night Eye asked. Katsuki almost didn't hear Sir Night Eye's question. It felt as if wind was brushing through his ears. Oh. Sir Night Eyes asked a question. He needed an answer. I don't think so, he said quietly. Then you can be redeemed. What? Katsuki asked almost absent-mindedly. As long as your victim has not died as a direct result of your goading, you can be rehabilitated. Once that has been completed, you can live a normal life. You can become a hero. And if he's dead? Then I will be forced to place you under arrest for murder. You will serve your sentence, most likely at Tartarus, due to the nature of your quirk. So what do we do now? Remember, as a hero, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. During this internship, we will begin your rehabilitation, and I will see if I can find your victim. What is their name? Midoriya Izuku. Midoriya Izuku, Night Eye repeated as he wrote down the name. I will find him. Then, at that time, we will decide your fate. End of chapter.